Now, let's go back to where much of the Harry and Meghan drama started, which was that Oprah interview. Within hours of that airing, inaccuracies came to light, including claims of a secret wedding ceremony and unsubstantiated allegations of racism. Other inaccuracies, or varying recollections, as the then Queen put it, continue to pop up the more Harry and Meghan speak about their personal experiences. What's happened now?
Well, this is what happens when my truth becomes the truth for them. But there were so many allegations during that Oprah interview. I think what happens now is they've had to backpedal on a lot of things that they've said. So if we take the racism allegations, for instance, which was actually probably the most consequential thing that came out of that interview, Harry and Meghan mentioned that there was a member of the royal family that expressed concern regarding the darkness of Archie's skin. Now, for anyone with half a brain cell, that's clearly an allegation of racism. And you don't have to be black or white or Asian to recognize this. But then in an interview, a recent interview with Harry, he mentioned that, Meghan never accused the family of racism, and that in his experience of the royal family, they're not actually racist, but they suffer from unconscious bias. And I think this is where really their story kind of, took a turn for the worse, because he was effectively gaslighting the public and making it seem as if we don't have independent judgment to see whether something is racist or not. And he basically said that the public just followed the media, even though we can clearly see that concerns over the darkness of someone's skin is clearly racism. And, for people that weren't even fond of the royal family, but kind of made Meghan and Harry the cause célèbre for actual long-standing grievances that they have with the royal family and with the UK at large, they really lost interest as well, because they were used to point to Meghan and Harry and say, look, they're an example that the British royal family is racist, and therefore Britain as large is racist. And the fact that they backpedaled really meant that they lost all their credibility, and many people lost interest with them with regards to that. But there were also so many other allegations that came out from that Oprah interview that, when your story is based on something that other people can see, you tend to be scrutinized a bit more critically. So, for instance, Meghan made the point that Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, as we call her here in the UK, taught her how to curtsy to the Queen when she first met her. And then Fergie made the point that she actually doesn't really know Meghan, and she's never really met her. And the only time that she remembers any sort of interaction she's had with her was at the Queen's funeral, where she thought she looked really nice. And so there were all these little things that came out as a result of that Oprah interview that have really been scrutinized quite heavily. And it's made the couple look really illegitimate and, quite frankly, just attention-seeking.
Yeah, I don't think it has helped their credibility. But going on from that, despite them continuing to disparage the royal family and turn their noses up at tradition and even the notion of hereditary privilege itself, Meghan and Harry apparently always wanted their children to carry the titles of princess and prince. That has now happened. And on one hand, I get it, but on the other hand, God, it's a bit rich, isn't it?
I mean, it's very rich, and most people can't help but think that they did this for money. Of course, the couple will dispute that. Reports have come from the Sussexes that they actually just wanted their kids to have their birthright, as Harry put it. But again, it's Harry's birthright to be a prince, and he's done everything in his power to disparage the institution that has given him this birthright. So again, it's very odd. We obviously know that the Sussexes have made a lot of money off their titles, given the fact that they have a Netflix documentary and they had an interview with Oprah and now Harry's book Spare. They're very aware that this wouldn't have happened if they weren't members of the royal family and they didn't have these titles. And it's also quite disparaging and insulting, because they're effectively prostituting their titles and the royal family to make more money. What is really odd is the fact that Harry and Meghan felt insulted when they found out that at the time their children wouldn't be eligible to be prince and princess, although they were forgetting the fact that Princess Royal Anne, her children, Zara Tindall and Peter Phillips, weren't entitled to use the title Prince and Princess, because at the time, only male members of the royal family could pass down their titles. But the way they made it come across in the Oprah interview shows, one, they just have no understanding of tradition, or they have no respect for it. Now that the royal decree has changed and female members of the royal family are eligible to be in the line of succession, but also female members of the royal family are also eligible to pass down their titles, which is why Harry and Meghan's children are now a prince and princess.
Yeah, this is a very good point, and I think when you may not respect that tradition, or in this case you can use it to leverage your own narrative, it does become a bit of an issue because there needs to be clarity around that sort of convention. But just from the American perspective, does the idea of the Sussex children having those titles kind of cut across the sentiment and the attitudes of Americans and their historical views on class and monarchy?
I think so. I think the Sussexes are becoming acutely aware of the fact that when they have more distance from the royal family, when they're seen as less relevant, it actually does affect their purse and their income, unfortunately. And they're learning the hard way that Hollywood has very little loyalty or care for them if they're not actually linked to the royal family, which is, again, why them attending the coronation is such a big deal, because they can still show that, hey, we have links and relevance to the royal family. In the same way, this is why they chose to give their kids the title of prince and princess. With all their attacks and kind of shots that they fired at the royal family, if the British monarchy was destroyed or abolished as a result of all the claims and allegations, they would have nothing to claim to. Their children would have no birthright, effectively, to that kind of institution. So it's very odd that they've chosen to do this, and it's quite disrespectful as well. And they may claim that this is just something they feel their children are entitled to, and they never meant to bash the monarchy and all of that. But at the end of the day, in the two plus years since they've left the royal family, they haven't done any of the progressive work that they've been saying they're going to do. To speak of, Meghan has filmed a podcast with a bunch of airheads in Hollywood. They've released a Netflix documentary to the tune of $100 million. They've released an interview with Oprah, again, where they're whinging about their family. They've recorded themselves running away and escaping the UK, which is something that no one does if they're genuinely escaping. Harry has released this tell-all memoir, which is very intrusive on the lives of the royal family, and just another excuse to profit off something that he hasn't actually earned, but just something he's lived. So it's very difficult for them to try and backpedal and seem like really legitimate characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, look, I've also had a look at this comparison to how other royals refer to themselves. And like you said, Prince Anne's children don't carry royal titles and they're very much carrying on normal lives. Now, is this just about convention and proximity to the throne, or is it also about the realities of modern royal life?
I think it is a bit of both. Obviously, at the time that Princess Royal Anne's children were born, her children were not eligible to use the title of prince and princess, and so that was the status quo in the royal family. But there is also a lot of it's very difficult to live as an active member of the royal family. You're effectively in a glass fishbowl, which is one of the things that Meghan and Harry pointed to. So you do want to give your children that option to live a normal life that you can. Zara Tindall, for instance, has many patronages, and she's a very much loved member of the royal family, but she's also a very normal person and a normal private individual. And so it is nice for her and other sort of less senior members of the royal family to have that option. I think that's something that didn't really click with Meghan and Harry, because I think living as private, quiet members of the public was not something they ever really envisaged or wanted.
Now, Esther, we had a great laugh a couple of weeks back about the South Park parody of the Sussexes. This week, it's Chris Rock having a go in his latest Netflix special. Here's what he had to say about those racism claims.
They're so racist, they're so racist. Some of that he went through was not racism. It was just some in-law because she's complaining. I'm like, what the she talking about? Oprah, they're so racist. They wanted to know how brown the baby's gonna be. I'm like, that's not racist. Because even black people want to know. How brown the baby gonna be?
Esther, is Chris Rock right here? Are we talking about general curiosity rather than general racism, or maybe a bit of both?
Well, I often say that there are three sides to every story. There's one side, the other side, and the truth. So we'll never actually know the nature of the interaction, this mysterious interaction that Meghan and Harry had with this mysterious member of the royal family that they still refuse to name, but is somehow a callous racist. I think in all likelihood, it was more curiosity than anything, because it's not unusual for people to wonder what their children would look like, particularly in an interracial relationship. I know that if I had a child with someone who was not of my race, my family would be curious what the child would look like. But I also think it highlights a bigger issue, which is that that a lot of the times it seems like this couple moves in bad faith. I think for them to make such allegations, knowing how sensational they will be and how much they could have the potential to paint the royal family as racist, when most people think actually it's pretty normal to wonder what a child would look like, especially as a result of an interracial relationship, just shows that the couple didn't really have very positive or good images of the royal family in general. Because if not, they wouldn't have done this, or at least they would have been more careful in the words that they use, as opposed to letting such rumours about the royal family's alleged racism proliferate for over 2 years, which is so awful and I'm sure has caused members of the royal family extreme distress.
The fact that those allegations of racism were kind of made, they were very open, they were just left out there to float around without being really particularised or dealt with, I don't think reflects well on anyone in that circumstance, to be perfectly honest. Now, one last thing before we go, Meghan is set to relaunch the TIG blog. Honestly, does she need another? Is this really necessary? Does she need another platform? Is this just another income stream for the Sussexes?
I think the predicament the Sussexes are in now is to actually paint themselves as progressive, legitimate actors of goodwill, good work, which is something that we've seen very limited amounts of since they left the royal family. I mean, in the time that they've left, really, they haven't done anything that they said that they would. In the same way that Princess Diana did, in terms of, you know, championing HIV causes and landmines and all of that. They haven't done anything even remotely similar to that. They've literally just enriched themselves of their story with the royal family over and over again. They've interviewed a few airheads in Hollywood who are fast losing interest in them anyway, because they're becoming more and more less relevant as the days go by. She's set to launch this lifestyle blog and to compete with the likes of Jessica Alba and Gwyneth Paltrow, who famously sells candles that smell like a vagina. But again, it's very weird because she's not a legitimate businesswoman in any regard, really. She spent the significant part of her adult life as an actress, as an aspiring actress, and then she landed a role on Suits. So it's going to be very interesting to see what she's going to do with this and why she's even doing it. Opening a lifestyle blog is not exactly the pinnacle of progressive work, but they are looking for a legitimate cause because they realise that now everything that they do will be linked to the royal family and the fact that they've spent the last 2 years whinging about them.
Yeah, excellent observations. Look, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Esther. We really appreciate it, and we'll chat with you again soon. Thank you.